London, 1980. A city caught between punk rebellion and Thatcher's iron grip. Neon signs flickered over the rain-soaked streets of Soho, while cigarette smoke curled above the heads of men in long coats. Amid the chaos, one man vanished, and another would risk everything to find him. Detective Inspector Alan Brewer of the Metropolitan Police sat in a darkened pub just off Old Compton Street nursing a whiskey he hadn't wanted. Outside, the red glow of a strip club pulsed like a warning light. He wasn't here for a drink. He was waiting for someone. Danny Hall, a young informant from Whitechapel, was late. Too late. Danny had told Brewer he had evidence linking a string of East End robberies to a former Cray associate named Reggie Kane, who'd supposedly disappeared in 1972. But Danny never showed. The next morning, his body washed up on the banks of the Thames near the Wapping docks, pockets empty, face beaten beyond recognition. The official story? Suicide. But Brewer had seen too many of those official stories in the past. He walked the narrow, brick-walled alleys of Whitechapel, past the market stalls of Petticoat Lane, and into the dive bars where men still talked in whispers about the Crays, even though they'd been locked up over a decade ago. A name kept surfacing, the Anchor Club in Bethnal Green. The club, once a jazz hotspot, now hosted dodgy card games and silent deals behind closed doors. Brewer strolled in under a fake name, looking the part in a worn leather jacket and tie, loosened just enough to suggest trouble. He didn't have to ask for Reggie Kane. One look from the bartender told him he was in the right place. Digging into Kane's past led Brewer to Rotherhithe, where Kane's brother ran a storage warehouse by the river. Brewer watched from across the street as trucks came and went at odd hours, always under armed escort. He followed one to Camden town, where the goods, stolen electronics and weapons were being offloaded. The operation was big, too big for Kane to be running it alone. Brewer contacted a journalist friend at the Evening Standard, Julia Marks, who'd been chasing similar stories. She had proof the stolen items were being sold through an antique front in Notting Hill, and it tied back to a group of ex-police officers dismissed in the late 70s for corruption during the Operation Countryman scandal. Just as they were closing in, Julia vanished. Her flat in Kensington had been ransacked, and the only thing missing was her camera. Brewer knew he had to act fast. He contacted one of his few trusted colleagues at Scotland Yard, Sergeant Mo Khan, who quietly traced a call from Julia's flat the night she disappeared. It led them to an abandoned warehouse in Silvertown near the old Tate and Lyle factory. Inside they found Julia tied up but alive, and Kane waiting for them, armed and smiling. "You should have stayed in Soho, Brewer," he said, raising the gun. But Brewer had come prepared. Mo Khan tackled Kane, and in the scuffle the gun went off, a single shot that echoed through the rusted beams of the warehouse. Kane lay bleeding on the cold floor, whispering about names he couldn't say, and a list kept safe somewhere in Vauxhall. A week later, Brewer received a plain envelope in his office at Scotland Yard. Inside was a key, and a note with only 3 words: King George's Park. Brewer followed the trail to a storage locker in Wandsworth, where he found a ledger with names, dates and bribes, implicating officers, MPs and businessmen. The web stretched higher than he'd imagined. He handed the file over to Internal Affairs and left the force the same day. He'd exposed the truth, but justice in 1980s London wasn't guaranteed. Some names on that list would never see the inside of a courtroom. Now, decades later, Brewer sits in a small flat in Bermondsey watching the Thames roll by, older, wiser, and still wondering if it was worth it. Because in London, the shadows don't disappear, they just move.